Thanks for joining us, and welcome back to the Watchman on the Wall podcast. Periodically, we'll bring you true stories of angelic encounters, heavenly visitations, near-death experiences, as well as modern-day prophecies that are relevant to us today. When we come back, we'll begin our next episode. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. And here's the best part, it's completely free. Anchor has a creation tool that will allow you to record and edit your podcast. This can be done right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you. This will allow it to be heard on Spotify, Apple, and many more. Now you can even add a song from Spotify to your podcast. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. So take a minute to download the Anchor app or just go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello and welcome back to the Watchman on the Wall podcast. Today we're going to hear from Chris Reed, who talks about his prophecy of Biden, boxes, and billionaires. He had a recent interview on the Lance Wallnau Show and is interviewed by Lance, and he goes into depth on some of these prophecies, some of which we've covered before and some are new. During the interview, we get a little insight on how he receives these dreams and visions, and he adds a little bit more to it than we've heard before, so I think you'll find it very fascinating. I know I have, and I hope you do too. So here now is Chris Reed on the Lance Wallnau Show.
Chris Reed was called to minister at the age of 12, and by the age of 14, he was already accepting invitations to minister. With that introduction, I bring to you my friend Chris Reed. Welcome, Chris.
Good to be with you, Lance.
Good to see you, Tiger. Lead pastor at Morning Star Church in Carolina. Are we in North Carolina there or South Carolina?
Just into South Carolina.
Just in, because you're kind of like Charlotte area, right? Towards the middle. So, but it's interesting to me that as of December 29th, 2022, you were already prophesying something. Can you tell me about what the occasion was for that? And then I want to share with people what that prophecy was, because it ties right into this moment.
Yeah, well, this was Morning Star's annual Vision Conference. It's our New Year's conference. And I, as I have done over the last 4 or 5 years, have prayed into what the Lord is saying is going to come, into the next year or within the vicinity of that time. And in fact, most of these prophecies, I can document that I was getting glimpses of them, 1, 2, 3, even 4 years ago, such as oil spills and different things that I declared that night. But one of them was a prophecy that I had about an exposure of boxes that would be found that contained information that had been hidden. And I titled the prophecy, Boxes, Biden, and Billionaires. And then I saw the words in the vision, boxes, 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 3 times, and that these boxes would be smoking gun information that would show without a doubt how much Chinese influence and bribery was involved with the Biden team, with the Biden campaign, all the way back, before the 2020 election. And I also have documented before the 2020 election how that China and Biden were coordinating this, and that there were secret door meetings. I have all of this stuff time-stamped as well. But now, in December 29th, it saw 2 months before that, this vision, but I waited to share them at the New Year's conference. And it was these boxes containing information that would show corruption with business dealings with the Biden family, China, and other nations who were trying to peddle or buy influence with the Bidens, and that there would come into exposure this reality.
Wow. I have the text. Mercedes, should we see this segment with the prophecy?
Yeah, let's play it.
And show it. Do we have it? If we have, then let's go ahead and let everybody listen to this prophecy from December 29th, mind you, 2022. What's interesting about this, the midterms is when the Democrats knew about these, but kept it secret for fear that if they told the truth, it would affect the midterm elections. So this was already known only in the White House, except for our prophets were picking it up. Let's go ahead and play that.
Somehow. And that's what I saw. As I said, Chinese bribery will be exposed. And it will be shocking how much their tentacles have been involved in all the nations, many of the nations of the earth. But yes, even in American politics, how it helped swing the 2020 election, and it will come to light and will be undeniable. And this will be tied in. The Chinese influence and bribery and influence will be tied in with the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, which will go in full exposure. And it will tie Joe to all of these things. I saw boxes being opened. Okay, I saw this 3 times because I've asked the Lord for more than one confirmation. I saw boxes being opened, and I saw the words smoking gun. That will prove without a doubt Chinese involvement, Chinese money involved with Biden's campaign.
Wow.
And not only that, but secrets being exposed even through the courts and House of Representatives inquiries that will shock the world. Boxes, boxes, boxes. Remember that. Boxes, boxes, boxes in Biden and billionaires. Boxes, Biden and billionaires. And how that there was even a suppression in the courts, a manipulation and intimidation for the courts to get involved when they knew more than what they were willing to say. I did see food shortages.
All right, hold it right there. Hold it off on the food shortages. So let's talk about this. So what we're really talking about in a real smoking gun way is the fact that the word could already be out on the inside that we've got to deal with Biden. I've heard rumors that they're going to try to remove him as president on the basis of this, so that they could try to knock out Trump also on the basis of mishandling documents or something. But in reality, they're trying to preempt an expose on Hunter and the Biden crime syndicate and how they were making money all these years off of backroom deals. Does that fit the context of what you were seeing prophetically?
It certainly does. And it's funny that you just mentioned the word backroom deals. I want to read you something, and this will be sent to your staff. They'll have it playing there. This is August 18th, 2021. And it's a timestamp note on my Apple products because I'm an iPhone, iPad guy, but it was an Afghanistan dream, and I recorded it. I had this dream on the night of August 17th, 18th, 2021. So almost a year and a half ago, where I saw Joe Biden in a room with dark windows before the 2020 election. He and his lawyers and representatives were talking to communist Chinese representatives. Biden left the room, and it was only Biden's reps talking to the Chinese communist government reps, and they said, quote, "Communist China will help Biden take the 2020 election if he will give Afghanistan to China in exchange for their help in helping him in the 2020 election." It was a quid pro quo. Then I woke up. That was August 18th, 2021. And then here's this. Listen to this. This is, as you'll see here, October 22nd, 2020. So we're talking over 2 years ago. I shared this on social media, October 22, 2020. I prophesied 2 days ago that before the debate tonight, because that was the debate between Joe and President Trump, there would be an exposure of corruption that will come out. I saw it clearly in prayer. Joe Biden's brother and son were leveraging millions of dollars from communist China. And a former Biden business partner came out tonight and revealed it. Parentheses, this man is a registered Democrat and a former naval officer.
Is that Bobulinski? That was Joseph Bobulinski,
yes. Yeah. And I finished it with this. The media that has refused to cover this story up till now will be forced to cover it. Even partisans will be forced to cover this. So in 2020 and in 2021, I was seeing prophetically in visions, backroom deals, Chinese bribery, Chinese influence, all the way back to 2020. And now in December 29th, 2022, this all culminated from these backroom deals and these money deals with China and other nations, boxes filled with information that would be damaging. And I do believe this and other things. They'll claim his health. He's 80 years old, his health and legal issues and all of this. This will ultimately, I think, cause him to be out of power before the end of his allotted term, which I also prophesied over a year ago that would happen, and that he would be removed from power. He would be taken out of power, whether it was claiming for health or whatever. But there's no going back. You can't unring this bell. This is revealed, and it's only going to get worse from here, and they know it. And I think, Lance, how that they will frame this as liberals, as the Democrats, how they will frame this to redeem Biden's failed presidency, to try to redeem his name and his legacy. He will say, by stepping aside, or those who speak for him will say, by him stepping aside or being taken out of the presidency, he will allow a woman to become, for a short time, president, and we will have our first ever woman president. And he'll say he was a champion of women and that he stepped out of the way so a woman could become president. And so with liberals and with Democrats and a lot of other people, that will be what he will use to redeem his legacy, because it's going to be so bad as this continues to unfold. They won't be able to hide it.
So, but while we got a few minutes on this call, you've got a couple of other prophecies. Which one do you think is the most relevant for our audience? We have about, I don't know, maybe 30, 40,000 people are going to be watching this. What do you think that they would like to know about? Do you want to talk about the economics, or where would you like to go?
Yeah, probably a couple of things. I would say the economics, this is a pretty well documented dream. I think it kind of went viral in March 25th, 2022. It was called the $50 bill dream. I'll read it quickly. I saw an unknown man dressed in a black suit holding a $50 bill, and he tore the $50 bill in 3 stages. As he stood in front of me, he took the $50 bill and tore off 1/3 of the $50 bill. And when he did, random people started bringing me up national newspapers, one right after the other, with headlines, all that I could read. The first one says, quote, "The dollar drops 30% in value," unquote, and a subtitle which read, "Mid-East oil strikes deal with China instead of the U.S." I then saw another headline which said, quote, "The perfect storm," subtitled, "Inflation reaches new high." I was handed another headline which said, quote, "Food shortage crisis as wheat and bread imports are at a stalemate," unquote. Another headline was handed to me which said something like, "Riots and civil unrest as citizens demand entitlement checks." This was the only headline I couldn't remember the exact wording, but that was close to it. I then saw the man dressed in black with the $50 bill. He tore it right in half. So the first time he tore it 1/3, and then he tore it in half, what was left. And when he did, an earthquake happened under my feet. Another person walked up and handed me a headline which read, Israeli and Palestinian two-state solution reached. Another headline handed to me by another person which read, quote, major earthquake hits the middle of the U.S., unquote. Then the man in black took the rest of the $50 bill, started tearing it into smaller pieces one by one. Another person walks up and hands me another headline, which says, quote, America in pieces, unquote. Subtitled, More States Separate from the Nation in Rebellion to the Federal Government. I was handed another headline, which read, U.S. military takes charge as uncertainty looms over the federal government. The man in black then took out a new dollar bill, but it was like a cell phone. It looked like a $1 bill, but it also looked like a cell phone. I could see George Washington's face, but it looked very different. And I remember looking at it. Someone else handed me a newspaper, and its headlines read, quote, new currency for a renewed nation, unquote. And the last headline that was handed said, quote, simplicity restored as Americans grow their own food again, unquote. So I saw this as a long-term playing out process that would be triggered by devaluing of the dollar, and it would be triggered by deals made with the Middle East and China instead of the U.S., and you can see how that could easily happen. I think the dollar's already not 30%, but has already, because of the inflation, been devalued. But because of the Biden's, view on oil and drilling, you can definitely see how Saudi Arabia, who refused to return his phone calls, would be glad to make deals with another nation instead of him.
We'll be right back with more of Chris Reed after this. Please join us on the Watchman News Network. It's a video news presentation of relevant stories dealing with end-time topics. Just subscribe to the Watchman on the Wall podcast on YouTube, and you will instantly have access to our latest WNN report. That's the Watchman News Network, exclusively found on YouTube. Hello again, this is the Watchman. Please join us each week for an exciting and inspirational podcast dealing with angel encounters, heavenly visitations, near-death experiences, as well as modern-day prophecies that are relevant to us today. So tune in each week and share it with your friends. After all, they could use a little inspiration in their life, too. That's the Watchman on the Wall podcast, and now you can find us on YouTube. We return now to Chris Reed and his Biden, boxes, and billionaires prophecy.
So, real quick question, Chris. Do you believe that what's going to come out will be more than the Biden money making off of Hunter selling influence, and that you think there's going to be some kind of an evidence of election interference, or would anybody be dumb enough to put in writing, let's have an agreement here, you're going to steal the election, right? We'll all sign the document. I can't imagine those documents being there. So how do you see that happening? Or do you?
Well, it's funny you said, it's funny you said, I don't see anybody dumb enough to do that. Once again, we're talking about a whole different group of people here that they're a different breed. And, yeah, I actually do. I think that the evidence will mount up, to the point to where he will have his own Democratic allies no longer have confidence and support in him, and he'll have to make a decision at some point whether he's going to run again in 2024. I think the pressure will ultimately come upon him to step aside, whether it be health, whether it be mounting legal problems, and he will redeem his legacy by putting a woman in his place as president, since Kamala Harris is the vice president. But yes, I do think this will come. And I, as I said in yesterday's broadcast, October 22nd, 2020, I saw over 2 years ago, Biden, his brother and son were leveraging millions of dollars from the Communist Chinese Party, and the media that had refused to cover it. And that was, remember when they refused to cover the New York Post story about the Hunter Biden laptop. I said, the Lord showed me in prayer, they will be forced to cover it. Even partisans will be forced to cover this. And that was October 22nd, 2020, as you have it there.
Wow. Now, we also covered some economic forecast information. The part of your dream or vision, was this a dream or a vision, by the way?
Yeah, from March 2022. Yeah, it was the dream, the $50 bill dream.
Okay. So you have a dream where it's being torn up, and each time it's torn up, a third of it's torn up, and then what's remained is torn in half, and then what's remaining of that is torn into little piecemeal. And the part that struck me is there's basically 3 stages of devaluation going on, and then you got headlines, but it led into food shortages and Americans, going back to growing their own food, et cetera, riots and civil unrest as we go to that final stage. And then you said there was like a cell phone $1 bill, kind of like a $1 bill type picture, which I assume is a digital currency, is the final iteration. After all this meltdown, the paper currency's out of the way. Now we're starting to go towards the system of the global currency, and Americans now have a digital currency. Is that pretty much where you saw this ending?
Yeah, the $50 bill, I think, represented the monetary value of the 50 United States, and how in a progression of months and years, one thing led to another that ultimately led us off of the dollar that we're on now to some sort of digital currency. And I think that we're going to see that happen. And so, yeah, food shortage. This was not something that I just predicted at the end of 2022. This was in March of 2022, so almost a year ago, and what documented, time-stamped, and all of that before this stuff started really going down. And in fact, I have another prophecy that I had actually had back in June of 2021, which I'll make sure is sent to you, but it said, I saw Sarah Sanders becoming the governor of Arkansas, June of 2021. I also saw an explosion in New York, a building crumbling, and I also saw 1976 level high inflation. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. Joe Biden is Jimmy Carter's administration 2.0. I mean, think about Jimmy Carter. High inflation, high interest rates, high gas prices, foreign policy in crisis. You had the Iranian hostage situation. I've also prophesied an Iranian revolution back 2 and 3 years ago. I have documented where I have evidence. I prophesied it again at New Year's 2023, a Chinese internal revolution. So there's a lot of these things that I think that are going to happen. And I have something else I'd like to share. One last thing. I saw back in January 19th of 2019, as your staff has this, they'll bring up there, I was taken in the realm of the spirit, and I saw 2 things. The second thing was in the ocean, you'll see a significant toxic spill into the ocean, oil and or radiation that will represent how polluted and corrupt the earth is now. We must pray for God to cleanse us in our land to bring healing. So it's almost like, and I prophesied this on December 29th, 2022, from a vision that I have written down here in January of 2019. I saw a third test, coming for Ron DeSantis. The first test was how he handled COVID in Florida as governor. The second test is how he handled Hurricane Ian, which happened in October of 2022, which I also had predicted in June of 2021. And I believe you've talked about that previously. But I believe there's a third test that will determine what he passes, whether he will be a future leader of America in D.C. And that will be this oil spill that I see coming in the natural in Florida. And I predicted that this will happen, and I see it now. It will be a sign of the pollution or this toxicity, or so to speak, that our land needs healed and our land needs cleaned. And I want to, if I may, add one last thing. I know I've talked a lot and I'll shut up, but I've shared this with my team. This is the first time I've shared this publicly. So this is a new prophecy, but I think that you'll hear it. I shared this with Rick. I shared this with others. This is the latest encounter that I had with the Lord. I was taken into the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C. This was in a trance vision, okay, in the second week of January of 2023. I was taken into a trance vision into the Capitol Rotunda, where a lot of times, you have figures, national politicians, lie in state when they die. It was a funeral. And I walked up and I saw the casket of someone in the casket in the Capitol Rotunda. And it was lying in state, Jimmy Carter. And, it was natural causes. He's old. He's in his 90s now. So that's not like some surprise. But there was a note that was on the casket at the end of the casket. And it said, a time marker, the death of Jimmy Carter, the natural death of Jimmy Carter, will be a signpost for the death of the Joe Biden administration.
Wow, that certainly makes sense, doesn't it? The death of, and that's breaking news, folks. I mean, I haven't heard that one before. Most of these I know about
Never
before I
shared
talk
it.
to you. Thanks for breaking that one on me. And that goes
Sorry.
with, no, I love it. That goes right with the last time that we had a national, observation of the passing of a statesman was Billy Graham, and his passing, and Donald Trump, who had officiated there and prayed that God would raise up a new generation of Billy Grahams for America, which I thought was interesting. So the death of the Biden administration, the passing of Jimmy Carter, but you've also mentioned two leaders in the West that would die. I think Putin and Biden, I think at some point you said would both pass off the scene in proximity to each other in the same year or so?
Fairly close together.
Yeah.
Yes, and the encounter that I had, they would be fairly close together. And the first time I prophesied this publicly, I have it documented, March the 1st, 2022, I saw the end of Putin's reign. So this would have been like 4 or 5 days after the start of the Ukraine war. I shared it here publicly. I put it in a note to timestamp it. We're starting to share these on our website now so that we have these actually documented on a website, morningstarministries.org. But yes, I did see the death of Vladimir Putin, or the end rather of his reign. I saw the death of his rulership, and I believe the death of him. But I saw that he would be brought out of power, and so would Biden, and it would be fairly close together. When they both came out of power before their terms of their allotted time in office were over.
So just go ahead, Mercedes.
I just had a question. So, Chris, the natural disaster, the oil or the toxic spill, was that here close to the States, or could that be globally anywhere?
I believe that was
Florida?
in the state of Florida.
Wow.
Because I saw it connected to the third test for Ron DeSantis.
Wow.
And if he passed the test, he can be a future president. And so, yeah, I think this is a third test for him. And he's tremendously past the first two. There's no doubt about it. How he responded to COVID in Florida, it's still the freest state, one of the freest states in the union, and how he responded to Hurricane Ian in the fall of 2022. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, he did the best that he could. I think he passed those tests, but I think he has one more. And it's got to do with this toxic spill, this oil spill, which, as I said, I can You'll have it there to be brought up on the screen there. I saw it back in 2019.
Wow.
And so I shared it again at the end of this year, or the end of 2022 for 2023.
Yeah.
Hello again, this is The Watchman. Please join us on our new video channel called Encounters from Beyond the Veil. It's the same exciting content as our audio podcast, but in a shorter, but yet a video format. Also, please subscribe so you won't miss any of our episodes. That's Encounters from Beyond the Veil, exclusively found on YouTube.
Well, thanks again for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. Any comments or suggestions you may have, you can send to thewatchmanonthewall2020@gmail.com. We encourage you to subscribe so you'll always be notified of our future episodes. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you next time on the Watchman on the Wall podcast.